Oh, sorry, buddy.
You don't actually need Ubers to play the godly Whirlwind build. In fact, you're even better off not using one of them in particular. Without any Ubers equipped, I'm still able to farm tier 100s in 1 minute 30, and I tried some pushing, which went just as fine as well. So as long as you're not pushing into the 130s or 140s, then you're good to go. And no, I'm not being force-fed triple GA items from my viewers. While they are indeed awesome, there's not that many of them el mao. In fact, most of my gear isn't even fully masterworked, and I couldn't be bothered to re-roll my gear. So I would definitely recommend this build for anyone, even the 35 kid dad gamers with grey hair and hemorrhoids. Alright, so let's talk a bit about how the build works for all the shit newbies out there, and then about what I've changed compared to the Uber version. Firstly, it's still a gushing wounds build, meaning our main damage is from bleeding. This bleeding, in turn, comes from the Berserk Ripping passive, which we trigger via Dust Devils. This is the reason I always recommend running Leap in the Whirlwind setup, so it can grant you Berserking. Because if you ever drop Berserking, then you're fucked, as you're not applying any bleeds. When it comes to bleeding, we're also scaling it insanely high via the Hemorrhage Legendary node. Due to this, we want to scale vulnerable damage as high as possible. I'm currently rocking about a 1-to-3 ratio between crit damage for the gushing wounds and vulnerable for hemorrhage. This also means that we're focusing a lot more on vulnerable than previously. The reasoning for this is that Berserk Ripping doesn't increase its damage from crits, as it only applies to the base skill damage. That sounds difficult. What does that even mean? Well, damn, my man, it means that all the additive crit damage that you typically grab for the gushing wounds is fucking useless for Berserk Ripping. It does indeed scale the gushing wounds, but vulnerable damage also scales the bleeding damage. Alright, while on this topic, let's talk about the Ubers. Firstly, we're throwing the granddaddy in the trash. I even did this in the full Uber version, and that's because of the added benefits we can get from using a polearm, for example. We don't need to hit 3 masterwork crits to cap out our Dust Devils, we get a bunch of additional stats, and we even gain 15% more damage just by using a polearm. And while using two-handed swords are supposed to increase your bleeding by 30%, that bonus does not work as intended when using Dust Devils for some reason. It works amazingly in the open world, but it's extremely inconsistent in the pit. So ditch the sword and grab a polearm, my man. Alright, so what Ubers do you actually want then? Well, all of them are useful. Even the granddaddy can be useful, but then you would need to hit all the masterworking crits, and that shit ain't happening. My favorite is Tyrael's Might, however, allowing you to off-screen enemies along with boosting your damage, followed by Shaco and Starless Skies. So if you have any Ubers, just equip that shit, and if you don't, then don't worry about it. Okay, that's a bit about the basics. I think it's easier if I just show my gear now, and you can start copy-pasting like a god. And first, we have the helmet. You definitely don't want the life per second here. I just happened to run out of flowers il mao. It's quite important to grab cooldown reduction, as you'll then be able to spam, leap just enough to keep up berserking permanently with ease. Other than that, smack on the Iron Blood's aspect and you're Gucci. Next up is the chest. And again, I'm out of flowers, and therefore fucked. You're going to replace the lightning resistance here with all resistance and masterwork that shit. Because then, you'll be resistance capped. I'm currently not capped due to this. The Undying aspect is also mandatory, allowing you to keep healing yourself whenever you spam the Whirlwind button. You can also see me rocking crowd control duration on all the armor pieces to extend challenging shout and imposing presence to gain massive amounts of health. Alright, and next up is the gloves. The most important stat to grab by far is crit chance. This is due to the massive scaling via gushing wounds. Other than that, try to grab some crit damage or vulnerable damage and slap on the Fierce Winds aspect to make your tornadoes bigger. And next up is the panties. One armor roll is enough to get you capped, and I'm using it here. For aspect, you're using the Bull Kathos aspect. This makes your leap spawn earthquakes and grants you damage reduction, along with being able to boost your damage via the earthquake aspect, which is pretty neat. Then we have the boots. The Yen's Blessing are just insane, basically doubling your shout uptime with being able to grant your 30% damage reduction. I absolutely love these, man. Okay, and up next is the interesting stuff, the weapons. It doesn't matter what gems you pick, just grab the best possible gems that you can craft. Either crit or vulnerable. On the two-handers, I'm getting chance to cast Dust Devils twice. If you do this, then you only need 2 mediocre rolls, and you don't need to hit the masterworking at all to get that shit capped. But you're completely free to mix chance to cast Dust Devils twice, and Dust Devil size depending on what rolls you get to get both of them capped. Just remember that Dust Devil size has higher rolls and is easier to cap. And on the two-handers, we're rocking Berserk, ripping along with the Dust Devil aspect to boost them the most, followed by Earthquake and Elements aspect on the one-handers. After that, we have the jewelry. On the amulet, your most important stat is Heavy-Handed. This amulet alone grants me 600% crit damage currently, and the Heavy-Handed is not even masterworked. I'd also keep the movement speed for speed running, but you definitely want to grab crit chance instead of max life here, because that damage bonus would have been fucking massive for me. I'm also rocking the devilish aspect here to boost that shit. And next up, the rings. The Giant Strides aspect reduces our leap cooldown so we can keep berserking up, and Bold Chieftain's aspect reduces our shout cooldown. Other than that, you're looking for 2 damage while berserking rolls to cap out Blood Rage in the Paragons, which we'll see soon, and grab 1 chance to make enemies vulnerable, as it's otherwise impossible to keep up vulnerable on enemies. Well, damn, my man, that's the gear and aspects. Let's check out how I set up my weapons now. I'm setting everything to polearms for 2 reasons. First, because it looks fucking cool. And secondly, because it grants us 15% extra big dam. And while 2-handed maces indeed increases your crit damage, it doesn't actually provide you with any critical strike damage bonus for gushing wounds. So don't use that shit. And due to all of this, we're also grabbing the 2-handed axe expertise for 10% damage bonus. Hey guys, wait a minute. Yep, just checked. And it's indeed skill trio fucking clock, and you know it, baby. This one has changed since I posted my Uber version. We'll obviously skip the basic skills because that shit is cringe as fuck, and head on over to the core skills. You'll want Enhanced Whirlwind for the Fury, and Pressure Point to more easily gain Vulnerable. You then go to pick up Imposing Presence and some awesome shouts. You also have Martial Vigor here, but due to not using Ubers, I'm a literal tank god, so I don't need that shit. Instead, go to the Brawling skills, pick up Warcry along with Leap. You want to max out Leap here unless you have Shaco to reduce its cooldown, and grab both Enhanced and Power Leap. Battle Fervor right here is our main source of berserking along with Warcry, so you'll definitely want that. And next up is some yummy weapon mastery passives. Just grab all of them yummy passives and you'll blast for sure. You then go to pick up Heavy-Handed, as this one works for the Gushing Wounds passive and Wrath of the Berserker for Big Dam. This one is absolutely godly when not using Starless Skies, as we'll stack it up with ease. And finally, Gushing Wounds. We want to get as near as 100% crit chance as possible. Due to this, I also recommend grabbing some crit chance elixirs and incenses if you intend to push. Other than that, just grab as much crit damage as possible and you'll be blasting. Well, damn, my man, we successfully completed the skill tree as well. What do you say about checking out the Paragons? How about fuck yes? Starting off with the Wrath Glyph, this one is godly for the added crit and fury generation. We then have the Warbringer node for fortify and Socket might for the added damage. In the Uber version, I was rocking Ire here for the damage reduction, but that is no longer needed. Might also helps you out with the resistances. Here on the left is also where we find the Hemorrhage node, but we want that one last. Instead, go to the Blood Rage node, which should be capped, and Socket Exploit for the fast vulnerable. We then go to the Decimator board, grab this yummy vulnerable node right here, and then check out the glyphs we can use here. We want to use Twister because it's godly, but the multiplicative damage bonus is apparently not working as intended right now, so instead, you can use the Executioner glyph for the 10% damage bonus. You then go to the Carnage board where you Socket Marshal. Having it here is absolutely godly for the extra berserking damage and damage reduction, and is also a must-have to reset your Wrath of the Berserker with ease. Well, damn will you look at that. You're still here, huh? You fucking legend. Sub while you're at it, my man, and let's check out how to get hecking good and learn how to game. This build is just extremely easy and fun to play. Just chug a few beers and start spinning, really. You'll barely need to use Leap, as you're running through packs of enemies in case you're a shit console abuser, because the Blood Rage node basically sorts berserking for you as you're speed blasting. But I definitely recommend it, and I also recommend just popping all of your cooldowns as often as possible. For bossing, you'll change the play style slightly. This is where it's important to use Leap on cooldown, as you'll otherwise lose berserking and get fucked. But other than that, you just blast, man. You should also be spamming Whirlwind rather than holding it down to get healed, but if you're not taking any damage, then you may as well just hold it down and chug a healing potion instead to avoid carpal tunnel syndrome. And that, my friends, is the godly Whirlwind build with no Ubers. I'll just see you in the next one, I guess.